welcome back to the afternoon, literary afternoon. So we were talking about T.S. Eliot's conversion, and I think one of the best biographers of this particular period of time for his life is Peter Ackroyd. Really put together what was going on, I believe, in the mind of Eliot. And there's a great quote here. The purpose of Eliot's conversion was twofold. One, the Church of England offered Eliot some hope for himself. And I think Eliot needed some resting place. But secondly, it attached Eliot to the English community and the English culture. And this is something that I had spoken of earlier. That part one really relies upon his Unitarian origins. Because in Unitarianism, that's what you live here on earth is, period. So, and what he needed was a bit more than that. There's a wonderful little joke, and my grandmother used it many, many times, as I always asked her, why do you still have a pew at Smoky Steve's? And she said, just in case. So anyways, 1932, finally separates from his wife, and Harvard offers him the Charles Eliot Norton professorship. Now this is his uncle and cousin, who this professorship is named after. And he accepts it. And he leaves Viv in England, and he finally arranges for the separation, and he stays in the U.S. till 1947. Now, Vivian was committed to the Northumberland Mental Hospital, and she remained there until she died. He had he was at this point in time very involved with Mary Trevlin, who was part of London University, and this it was kind of an odd relationship, because when he was out and attending functions, this is the woman that he took with him. This is the woman that was on his arm. And Peter had brought up that moral code, and he fought in his own mind and his own emotion with what he was doing, knowing that he had a wife in the mental institution, and yet being out in public with another woman. And not just knowing to be out with that other woman, but knowing his want, his wanton was the word that he used, for this other woman that he had on his arm. And knowing that she was very interested in him as well. Of course, he never acted on it, because again, like Peter had mentioned, very uncomfortable. And uncomfortable with just the action and the thought of it. So he returns back to England, and becomes fast friends with Davy Hayward. And I think at this point in time, Davy Hayward was saying, "Oh, wait a minute, this is a man of many letters. Let's try to get his papers together." And I think that's really what Davy Hayward's objective was to organize T.S. Eliot. T.S. Eliot never thought of himself in that way, to be organized. And to place a great deal of effort on what he had written. So in 1950. Now remember, he was sharing a flat with Davy Hayward. This is Hayward is the one who really put together all of the pre-works of Proof Rock. Proof Rock hadn't been published at this point yet. And so Davy Hayward put together the poems written in early youth, which is really the culmination of all of the stuff that he'd written from his early childhood to present time. And so in 57, and he's 68 years old in 1957, he marries Valerie Fletcher, who was 30 years old. Boy, oh boy. That would be great. And in contrast to his first marriage, Valerie's young and vibrant and beautiful, and there was no emotional issues, and there was no woman problems, and what was very interesting about it, she was the secretary for Faber and Faber, which is the publishing company, and the weird thing about it, and I guess a lot of this revolved around that concept of secrecy. That wedding was kept a secret, and I don't think that was released until after death. That marriage was released until after death. I'm pretty sure that's how that worked. Or
I'm not sure. I know they married 6:30 in the morning in a very obscure church.
Yep.
No one knew.
Yeah. Say that again?
I think that they left a note
Yeah.
at the office that they were married.
Right. Right. Well, his work companions and the Fabers and
Everyone was shocked.
they're quite shocked about it. Let's get back here. This is not really well organized. So this is 1958. In 1960-ish, his health started to deteriorate. He was also he worked as editor to the Wesleyan University Press, and he started to put his papers together with Davy Hayward. And he progressively got worse, suffered from lung-related problems, bronchitis, and all due to heavy smoking. He was a 3-pack-a-day guy, and he essentially died of emphysema in January 4th, 1965. What I really want to point out is the amount of work that he did. Also to note that the New York school, he had 2 friends there. The late, great Louis Auchincloss, who was a really good friend of T.S. Eliot's, and second, the late, great John O'Hara. And these 3 gentlemen corresponded both critically and in acclaim to each other. And they never lost their friendship, no matter how dreadful the London school and the New York school were to each other. But I do want to mention his writings, and there's a great list here. 22 prose. 33 epic poems. 30 concise poems. 40 books of poetry. 8 plays. 45 fiction pieces. And 3 after-death publications on works that he hadn't yet put together, but they put it together after. Yeah, there are his critical pieces and pieces that he wrote for particular magazines of the era, a little over 3,000 pieces, and his awards. I'll just read a couple of them. Order of the Merit, 1948. Nobel Prize, 1948. Dante Medal, 59. Order of the Letters, 1960. Presidential Medal of Freedom, 64. 13 honorary doctorates. Tony Award, 1950, for a cocktail party. Tony Awards for 1983, of course, all involving cats. There's a college within Kent University, the University of Kent, called the Eliot College, named after him. What do you think they teach at Eliot College? Literature. 23 commemorative postage stamps. I did not know that. A star on the St. Louis Walk of Fame. The Goethe Prize, 1955, and Legion of Honor, 1951. Very interestingly enough, the state of Ireland, or the Republic of Ireland today, gave him the Irish Language Prize. And he influenced these individuals, and I'm going to read off all of them keynoting particular pieces that were written. Number 1, James Joyce, Robert Frost, Virginia Woolf, Ezra Pound, Hart Crane, William Gaddis, Alan Tate, Geoffrey Hill, Seamus Heaney, Sean O'Riordan, Russell Kirk, and last but not least, he won the Modern Greek Prize for translation. The first time that a Westerner ever won the Greek Prize. Who usually wins the Greek Prize? Anybody have an idea? Other Greeks. So we have a couple of people that are going to come up and read, and then we're going to close out.
Linda.
How about Linda first?
I think you've got a bigger program. I don't have anything grand to say other than the fact that what little I knew of T.S. Eliot, it just seemed like he was not a depressive person, not sad, but just had a hard time being happy, being that he was so creative. But as we've been explained here, he was such an observer of life. And back in the day when my grandmother would first read me these lovely little stories, it struck me how smart this man must be to know all these things about cats, because that's how we felt about our cats, that they were just had all these human qualities. Gus the theater cat. Gus is the cat at the theater door. His name, as I ought to have told you, is really Asparagus, but that's such a fuss to pronounce, so we just call him Gus. His coat's very shabby, he's thin as a rake. He suffers from palsy, and it makes his paws shake. Yet he was in his youth quite the smartest of cats, but no longer a terror to mice and to rats. For he isn't the cat that he was in his prime, though his name was quite famous, he says, in its time. And whenever he joins his friends at their club, which takes place in the back of the neighboring pub, he loves to regale them, if someone else pays, with anecdotes drawn from his palmiest days. He has acted with Irving, he's acted with Tree, and he likes to relate his success in the halls, when the gallery once gave him 7 catcalls. And his grandest creation, as he loves to tell, was the fire-throat fiddle, the fiend from the fell. I have played, so he says, to every possible part, and I used to know 70 speeches by heart. I've extemporized back chat, I knew how to gag, and I knew how to let the cat out of the bag. I knew how to act with my back and my tail, and with an hour of rehearsal, I could never fail. I had a voice that would soften the hardest of hearts, whether I took the lead or just small character parts. I've sat by the bedside of poor little Nell. When the curfew was rung, I've swung on the bell. In pantomime season, I never fell flat, and once I understudied Dick Whittington's cat. But my grandest creation, as history will tell, was Fire-Throat Fiddle, the fiend from the fell. Then if someone will give him a toothful of gin, he will tell you how he played a part in East Lynne. At Shakespeare performance, he once walked on Pat when some actor suggested a need for a cat. He once played a tiger, he could do it again, which an Indian colonel pursued down a drain, and he thinks he still can, much better than most, produce blood-curdling noises to bring on a ghost, and he once crossed a stage on a telegraph wire to rescue a child when the house was on fire. He says now these kittens, they do not get trained, as we did in the days when Victoria reigned. They never get drilled in a regular troop, and they think they are smart, just to jump through some hoops. He'll say as he scratches himself with his claws, well, the theater's certainly not what it was. These modern productions are all very well, but there's nothing to equal from what I hear tell. That moment of mystery when I made history as the Fire-Throat Fiddle, the fiend from the fell.
You were mentioning the awards that he had gained, but I guess you never knew that when I was in the seminary, cursing was very much frowned upon. And if someone had a hardship, instead of saying the S word, like tough shit, they would go T.S. Eliot. And so that was our substitute that we gave him in the seminary. During the Canterbury Festival, he was asked to write a play, and he wanted to get poetry back into the plays. Because the way that they were writing, he didn't agree. So he came up with a Murder in a Cathedral, which is based on like a Greek tragedy, where they have the chorus that will give you the presence of setting the scene, and then 2 parts. It's a 2-part play, and it's basically the conflict between church and state, or between Henry II and Thomas Becket, who was murdered. And basically, there's a conflict in life that we all go through. Like, you can't serve 2 masters. You know, either you like chocolate or you like peanut butter, but if you put them together, you can have a Reese's cup. But you can't do that with the church and the state. And together, Henry and Thomas Becket were very good friends. They had partied in their early lives together, and he was appointed chancellor by Henry. So he had all this power. Being a chancellor was almost like president or something. You had all the power that was given to him. And then he was made Archbishop of Canterbury. But there was a conflict that was going through the church and state, and Thomas was exiled to France for 7 years. And on his way back, he decides to go back to England. He's threatened by the priest and the nuns, and also by the Henry himself, that he would be murdered. And the play takes place where he's going through this conflict, and he gets introduced to 3 tempters that come in, kind of like paralleling with the temptation of Christ. And one guy comes up, he goes, why don't you just go back to your old ways to be a womanizer and a drunkard and stuff like that, and life would be pretty good. And he decides not to do that. And he goes, well, if you go back to being chancellor, you can still do good for the poor, but you'd have a lot of power. And that's a temptation. He refused to do that. And then he says, well, you could just overthrow the throne and just be a powerful man. He didn't want to do that. And then he says, well, maybe if I stay against the Pope, I can become a martyr. And that's where they're saying he might be called a murder-suicide, because he decided that he would stick to serving God and not serving the Pope. And Henry gets all upset about this, and 3 of his knights, or 4 knights, overhear Henry's problem with Becket, and they decide, let's kill him. So in the first part of the play, the 3 tempters become the 4 kings, and they go in and try to kill him. And they succeed in it. And the knights knew that they wouldn't get any benefit from it, because the king would actually say it was okay, it's not okay to do this. And then Henry thought that his friendship with Thomas would bring the church, he would have more power. That he said, well, he's not my friend, so we'll get this settled. And it didn't happen. And then they end up figuring that Thomas Becket is actually a little bit crazy. So it is a murder-suicide. So there's the conflict, and I wish that someone would rewrite it again the same way that they took West Side Story from, what's the famous Shakespearean play, Romeo and Juliet. So I think I'm going to start reading the play again and see if I can come up with some type of story in modern times to bring back the first assassination of an archbishop. So she has a copy of the book. I haven't read the whole play, but I just remember from the seminary we read it because of us in the cathedral. So just give you a reason to maybe want to pick up one of his works and read it. Ta-da! Okay.
We hope that, everybody that's here has been familiar in some point with T.S. Eliot, but our whole goal with doing these literary afternoons is to encourage people to read something that you haven't read before, investigate an author, give us some ideas if you have any suggestions for things that you'd like to hear us do some more in-depth on. It would be great, and we hope to keep coming out for them, because we're going to keep doing them the first Sunday of every month, and Ian's got a schedule down he's going to let you know about it.
Okay, August, first of all, do we have any questions about T.S. Eliot? Not at all. Any comments? Okay.
Did you get it?
It was great.
Did we miss anything?
No.
Anybody got something
I'm
to
not an
add? I'm
expert on
sure we
Eliot.
missed a lot of
Okay.
stuff.
I thought it was great.
We're always
August-
eager for contributions.
August 2nd, the first Sunday, is Carlos Castaneda's. And September 13th, which is the second Sunday of September, will be Edgar Allan Poe. So we'd love to have you for those events. I'd like to thank the Blueberry Patch, the Inktank, Martha Muzzy, Kurt Thompson, and of course our hosts, Neptune Grill. Please, I hope you come back on August 2nd. Thank you.
Tijan, this dream's where you belong. Your golden journey now has just begun, with your mother's arms to hold.